Chapter 1. A Prince of Macedonia. In the heart of the ancient world, nestled among towering mountains and lush valleys, lay the Kingdom of Macedonia. It was a land rich in history and tradition, where the whispers of the past mingled with the ambitions of the present. In this realm of warriors and scholars, a prince was born. His name was Alexander. Alexander's early life was set against the backdrop of a palace filled with the hustle and bustle of court life. His father, King Philip I, was a ruler of great ambition, known for his skill in both diplomacy and war. His mother, Queen Olympias, was a woman of strong will and fierce determination. From his parents, Alexander inherited a passion for glory and a heart that yearned for adventure. The young prince's days were filled with the rigorous training expected of a Macedonian noble. He learned to ride, to fight, and to command under the watchful eyes of his tutors. Yet Alexander was not like other boys. There was a spark in him, a burning curiosity about the world beyond his father's kingdom. This curiosity was fed by his education under one of the greatest minds of the time, the philosopher Aristotle. Sent to study in a small academy away from the palace, Alexander and a select group of companions were immersed in lessons that ranged from philosophy and ethics to science and politics. Aristotle's teachings opened new horizons for Alexander, igniting his imagination with tales of distant lands and great heroes of the past. But life at court was not just about learning. From a young age, Alexander was exposed to the complex web of Macedonian politics. He observed his father navigating alliances and rivalries, using both wisdom and force to expand his realm. These lessons in power and leadership were not lost on the young prince. One of the most defining moments of Alexander's youth came when he was barely in his teens. A group of diplomats from Persia, then the greatest empire in the world, arrived at the Macedonian court. They came bearing gifts and words of friendship, but behind their smiles lay the unspoken tension of potential conflict. Alexander watched as his father dealt with these foreign envoys, marveling at Philip's ability to maintain his composure and wit in the face of veiled threats. As Alexander grew, so did his responsibilities. He was given command of his first military mission while still a teenager, tasked with quelling a rebellion in a distant part of Macedonia. The young prince led his men with a confidence that belied his years, earning their respect and loyalty. This victory was the first taste of command for Alexander, and it left him hungry for more. Yet, despite his burgeoning reputation as a leader and warrior, Alexander's relationship with his father was complex. King Philip, while proud of his son's accomplishments, was also wary of his ambition. The court was rife with rumors of tension between the king and his heir, fueled by Olympias' own ambitions for her son. Alexander found himself caught between his loyalty to his father and his own growing sense of destiny. This tension reached a breaking point when King Philip took a new wife, a young noblewoman who could bear him more sons. To Alexander, this marriage threatened his place as Philip's successor. During the wedding feast, a drunken argument broke out between Alexander and one of Philip's supporters, who implied that Alexander was now less significant in the line of succession. Enraged, Alexander hurled his goblet at the man, only to be rebuked by his father. The confrontation ended with Alexander storming out of the feast, his relationship with Philip more strained than ever. In the aftermath, Alexander and his mother Olympias left the Macedonian court, seeking refuge among their allies. This period of exile was a time of reflection for Alexander. Away from the palace, he pondered his future and the kind of ruler he wanted to be. He dreamed not just of ruling Macedonia, but of uniting the Greek city-states and leading them against their common enemy, Persia. The estrangement from his father did not last long, however. Macedonia needed a strong and united leadership to face its challenges, and Philip knew that Alexander was integral to his plans. Father and son reconciled, and Alexander returned to court with a renewed sense of purpose. His time would soon come. When King Philip was assassinated by a disgruntled bodyguard, Alexander was proclaimed king at the age of 20. The young prince who had once dreamed of greatness now faced the daunting task of ruling a kingdom on the brink of war. As he stood before the people of Macedonia, Alexander felt the weight of his new crown. Yet, within him burned the fire of ambition, and the dream of a united Greece standing as one against the might of Persia. His journey to legend had just begun. In this first chapter of Alexander's story, we see the seeds of the man he would become, a ruler of unparalleled ambition, a student thirsty for knowledge, and a warrior born to lead. His early life in Macedonia was a time of preparation, a period that shaped the prince into the conqueror known as Alexander the Great. Chapter 2. Under Aristotle's Guidance. In the heart of ancient Macedonia, a young prince named Alexander embarked on a journey that would shape him into one of history's greatest figures. This chapter of his life began when he was just 13 years old, under the guidance of a man whose name would also echo through the ages, Aristotle. Aristotle, a philosopher from Athens, was not only wise but had a mind as sharp as the swords of Macedonia's finest warriors. King Philip II, Alexander's father, knew that if anyone could prepare his son for the future, it was Aristotle. So, in a quiet place called Mieza, Aristotle's school for Alexander and a few select companions began. Imagine a classroom not with walls and desks, but under the shade of trees, beside flowing streams, and amidst the whispering winds. This was where Alexander's education took place. Aristotle taught him not just to read and write, but to think, question, and understand the world in a way no one else could. One of the first lessons Aristotle shared was about virtue and vice, about what it means to be good, and how easy it is to stray towards being bad. He explained that every person has the power to choose their path, much like a soldier decides whether to use his sword for protection or destruction. Alexander learned about the great heroes of the past, like Achilles and Hercules. He admired their strength and courage, but also began to understand the importance of wisdom and compassion, thanks to Aristotle's teachings. The stories were not just tales of adventure. They were lessons on leadership, bravery, and the complexities of human nature. Aristotle also introduced Alexander to the wonders of science. They studied the plants, animals, and the stars above. Alexander was fascinated by the idea that the world was governed by laws that could be understood and explored. This curiosity would later drive him to seek knowledge from the lands he conquered. Politics and philosophy were also crucial parts of Alexander's education. Aristotle taught him about the different forms of government and how each had its strengths and weaknesses. They debated on what made a just ruler and the responsibility of a king towards his people. Alexander, with his sharp mind, engaged in these discussions eagerly, showing a deep understanding of the complexities of ruling a kingdom. One of the most important lessons Aristotle imparted was about the Greek concept of arete, meaning excellence in all things. He explained that true success was not just in conquering lands, but in achieving excellence in oneself, in striving to be the best in virtues, intellect, and actions. This lesson would stay with Alexander throughout his life, pushing him to seek greatness not just on the battlefield but within himself. However, life at Mysa was not all studies and serious talks. Alexander enjoyed sports and music, learning to play the lyre, a stringed musical instrument. Aristotle encouraged these pursuits, knowing that a balanced life was essential for a well-rounded leader. The bond between Aristotle and Alexander grew strong. Aristotle was not just a teacher, but a mentor and a guide. Under his guidance, Alexander's mind and character were shaped, preparing him for the challenges ahead. The lessons learned in the calm of Mysa's natural classroom would echo in the tumult of battles and the halls of power Alexander would soon encounter. As the years passed, Alexander's time with Aristotle came to an end. He had grown from a curious boy into a thoughtful and ambitious young man. The knowledge and wisdom imparted by Aristotle equipped Alexander with the tools he needed to pursue his destiny. When he left Mysa, it was not just as a student stepping out from under his teacher's shadow. He left as a prince ready to embark on a journey that would transform him into Alexander the Great. Aristotle's teachings would remain with him, a constant companion in the conquests and challenges that lay ahead. The story of Alexander under Aristotle's guidance is a testament to the power of education and mentorship. It shows how a teacher's wisdom can light the path for a student's future, shaping not just a leader, but a legend. As Alexander stepped into the broader world, ready to make his mark, the lessons from Aristotle's school in Mysa would be his most valuable weapon and guide. Chapter 3. The Young King. Chapter 3 of our story opens in the kingdom of Macedonia, a land of rugged mountains and fierce warriors. It was a time of great change and uncertainty, for King Philip II, the ruler of Macedonia and father of Alexander, had been tragically assassinated. The kingdom was left in shock, and a young Alexander was suddenly thrust into a role he had been prepared for, but hoped would not come so soon. He was now the king, the ruler of Macedonia, at the tender age of just 20 years old. The news of Philip's death spread like wildfire, not just within the borders of Macedonia, but also to the neighboring states and the far reaches of the Persian Empire. Some saw an opportunity in this tragedy, thinking Macedonia would be weak with a young king. They could not have been more wrong. Alexander, though young, was not a boy to be underestimated. He had been educated by the best, including Aristotle, and had spent his life watching his father turn Macedonia into a powerful kingdom. Alexander knew that to keep his kingdom safe and united, he must act swiftly and decisively. His first challenge came from within. Some of Macedonia's regions saw Philip's death as a chance to regain their independence. Alexander responded with a mixture of diplomacy and force. He marched his army into these areas, showing that he was not just a boy on the throne, but a king ready to defend his kingdom. His message was clear: Macedonia would remain united, but Alexander's vision went beyond just keeping his father's kingdom intact. Philip had dreamt of conquering Persia, the vast empire to the east that had once sought to dominate Greece. Alexander inherited this dream, but he also made it his own. He began preparing for a campaign that would change the world. He worked to secure his northern borders, striking swiftly against the Thracians and Triballi. These victories were not just military triumphs, They were messages to his enemies and his allies alike. Alexander was showing that he was a leader to be respected and feared. Meanwhile, in the south, the Greek city-states were watching Alexander's rise with a mix of awe and anxiety. Some cities, like Athens and Thebes, bristled at the thought of Macedonian dominance. Alexander, understanding the importance of Greece in his plans for Persia, acted both as a warrior and a statesman. He offered peace and protection to those who would recognize him as their leader, but he was also ready to use force if necessary. The young king's determination was put to the test in Thebes, where a rebellion against Macedonian rule broke out. Alexander's response was swift and brutal. He besieged Thebes, and after taking the city, he destroyed it as a warning to others who might challenge his authority. While the destruction of Thebes was a dark moment, it served its purpose. Other Greek city-states, seeing the fate of Thebes, chose to join Alexander rather than oppose him. With Greece secured, Alexander turned his attention to the grand stage of his ambition, Persia. He began gathering an army, not just of Macedonians, but of all Greeks who were willing to join him in his quest. This army was to be a force unlike any the world had seen, equipped with the finest weapons and led by a king who had proven himself on the battlefield and in the halls of power. Alexander also understood that a successful campaign against Persia would require more than just military might. He needed a strong economy to fund his army and a stable kingdom to ensure there was a home to return to. He worked tirelessly, implementing reforms to strengthen Macedonia's economy and ensuring that his rule was secure. As preparations for the campaign against Persia continued, Alexander's mind often returned to the lessons of his youth. He remembered Aristotle's teachings about virtue, wisdom, and the importance of understanding those you seek to lead. These lessons would guide him not just in conquering new lands, but in ruling them. The chapter closes on the eve of Alexander's departure for Asia. Standing before his assembled army, Alexander was not just a king or a commander. He was a symbol of ambition, a beacon of hope for those who dreamed of glory and revenge against Persia. His eyes were set on the horizon, on the lands and battles that lay ahead. Alexander's journey to fulfill his father's dream and carve his own place in history was about to begin. In this chapter of our story, we have witnessed the transformation of Alexander, from a prince mourning his father to a king consolidating his power and preparing to embark on one of history's greatest adventures. His story teaches us that leadership demands both strength and wisdom, and that even the youngest ruler can rise to meet the challenges of their time. Chapter 4: The Path to Persia. As dawn broke over the land of Macedonia, a great army prepared to make its mark on history. This was not just any army. It was led by Alexander, the young king with dreams as vast as the empire he sought to conquer. The target of his ambition was Persia, a realm so rich and powerful, its name alone evoked awe. The journey that lay ahead was fraught with dangers and challenges, but Alexander and his men were ready. The first obstacle in their path was not an enemy army, but the mighty Hellespont, the narrow strait that served as the gateway from Europe to Asia. Crossing it was a symbolic act, marking Alexander's entry into Persia's sphere of influence. The operation to get tens of thousands of men, their horses, and supplies across the water was a monumental task. But under Alexander's command, the army achieved it with remarkable efficiency. As Alexander set foot on Asian soil, he symbolically threw a spear into the earth, claiming the land for the Greeks as if it were an enemy to be conquered. But claiming the land and actually conquering it were two different things. The Persian Empire was vast, and its king, Darius III, had resources at his disposal far beyond anything Alexander could muster. The first real test of Alexander's campaign came at the river Granicus, where Persian forces lay in wait to stop the Macedonian advance. The Persians, confident in their numbers and the strength of their cavalry, took a strong defensive position on the far side of the river. Alexander's generals advised caution, suggesting that they wait until dawn to attack. But Alexander, eager to prove his mettle and make a statement to both his allies and enemies, ordered an immediate assault. The battle that ensued was fierce. The Macedonians had to fight their way across the river under a hail of arrows, then engage the Persian cavalry, renowned for their skill and bravery. Alexander himself led the charge, displaying a recklessness that both inspired and terrified his men. He plunged into the heart of the battle, fighting hand to hand against Persian nobles. The Macedonians were at a disadvantage, struggling against the current of the river and the determined defense of the Persian troops. But Alexander's leadership turned the tide. His audacity and skill as a warrior motivated his troops to push harder, driving the Persians back. The battle was brutal, and for a time it seemed as if Alexander's campaign might end before it truly began. But the discipline and training of the Macedonian phalanx, combined with the effectiveness of their cavalry, eventually prevailed. The Persians were routed, and their commanders fell one by one. The victory at the Granicus was a pivotal moment for Alexander and his army. It demonstrated to the Greeks, the Persians, and the world that Alexander was a force to be reckoned with. It also sent a clear message to Darius III. Alexander was not merely raiding his borders, but aiming for the heart of his empire. However, the victory was not without cost. Many brave Macedonians fell in battle, and Alexander himself had several close calls. The battle taught him the importance of caution and strategy over mere bravery. It was a lesson he would take to heart in the campaigns to come. The aftermath of the Granicus opened the doors of Asia Minor to Alexander. City after city fell to his forces, not just through conquest, but also through diplomacy. Alexander's reputation as a liberator preceded him, and many cities welcomed him as a hero who would free them from Persian rule. But even as he celebrated his victories, Alexander knew that the hardest challenges lay ahead. Darius III was gathering a massive army to crush the invaders, and the terrain of the Persian Empire would test the limits of his men's endurance. Yet, the young king's eyes were always on the horizon, always looking towards the next battle, the next victory. With the crossing of the Hellespont and the triumph at Granicus, Alexander had taken the first steps on the path to Persia. The journey would be long and fraught with peril, but for Alexander, there was no turning back. He had set his sights on conquering an empire, and nothing less would satisfy the ambition that burned within him. In this chapter, we have followed Alexander on the initial stage of his epic campaign, witnessing his boldness in crossing into Asia and his tactical genius at the Battle of Granicus. These early successes set the stage for what was to come, laying the foundation for his legend. As we close this chapter, we are left to ponder the blend of courage, ambition, and leadership that drove Alexander forward, forever changing the course of history. Chapter 5. The Siege of Tyre. After the victory at Granicus, Alexander's campaign continued through Asia Minor. But a new challenge loomed on the horizon, the city of Tyre. Tyre was not just any city, it was a fortress on an island, surrounded by the deep blue waters of the Mediterranean Sea. Its walls were tall and strong, and its people were determined defenders. For Alexander, conquering Tyre was essential. It was not only a strategic military target, but also a symbol of his determination to control the seas and ensure the safety of his fleet. As Alexander approached Tyre, he sent messengers to the city, offering peace if they would submit to his rule. The Tyrians, confident in the strength of their fortress, refused. They believed their island was impregnable and that no army, not even Alexander's, could breach their walls. This refusal set the stage for one of the most remarkable sieges in history. Alexander, undeterred by the challenge, began planning the siege. He understood that a direct assault on the city was impossible due to the sea barrier. So, he decided to do the unthinkable: build a causeway from the mainland to the island. This massive engineering feat would require thousands of tons of rocks, timber, and rubble. It was an audacious plan, and many doubted its feasibility. But under Alexander's unwavering command, the work began. The construction of the causeway was a Herculean task. The deeper the builders went into the sea, the more difficult the construction became. The Tyrians, seeing what Alexander was attempting, launched attacks from their walls and ships, hurling missiles and launching fire ships at the causeway. Many of Alexander's men fell during these assaults, and the progress was slow and costly. Despite these setbacks, Alexander's resolve never wavered. He ordered the construction of large siege towers, filled with archers, to protect the workers and counter the Tyrian attacks. He also called for a fleet of ships from nearby cities that had submitted to his rule. This fleet would be essential in blocking Tyrian attempts to interfere with the construction of the causeway and in isolating the city. The siege of Tyre went on for months. The Tyrians fought with the courage of those defending their home, knowing that their survival depended on keeping Alexander at bay. But Alexander's determination matched their defiance. Every obstacle the Tyrians put in his path, he overcame with ingenuity and force. Finally, after 7 long months, the causeway reached the island. Alexander's siege towers, taller than the city walls, allowed his archers to clear the battlements. His catapults battered the walls, and his fleet, now controlling the waters around Tyre, prevented any escape or reinforcement. The final assault on Tyre was a fierce battle. Alexander's forces breached the walls and poured into the city. The Tyrians, though outnumbered and outmatched, fought valiantly to protect their homes. But in the end, the city fell to Alexander. The capture of Tyre was a turning point in Alexander's campaign. It demonstrated his strategic brilliance and his ability to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The fall of Tyre sent a clear message to the rest of the world. No fortress was impregnable against Alexander's ingenuity and determination. The siege also had a darker side. The long months of conflict resulted in many deaths on both sides, and the aftermath was harsh for the defenders of Tyre. Alexander's treatment of the city was severe, a warning to others who might resist his rule. Yet, even in its brutality, the siege of Tyre was a testament to Alexander's resolve to fulfill his vision of a vast empire. In this chapter of our story, we have seen Alexander face one of his greatest challenges. The siege of Tyre was not just a military victory. It was a symbol of Alexander's relentless pursuit of his goals, regardless of the obstacles in his way. It showed his ability to think creatively, to adapt, and to lead his men through the toughest of situations. The fall of Tyre opened the way for Alexander's further conquests in the Persian Empire. It solidified his control over the Mediterranean coast and provided a base from which he could launch his campaigns deeper into enemy territory. As we leave this chapter behind, we are reminded of the complexities of leadership and the heavy costs of ambition. Alexander's journey continues, driven by his dream of empire and marked by both his remarkable achievements and the challenges he faced along the way. Chapter 6: Egypt's New Ruler. After the arduous siege of Tyre, Alexander and his army continued their march toward Egypt. The land of the Nile, with its ancient mysteries and colossal monuments, was under Persian control. But unlike the fierce resistance he encountered before, Alexander was greeted not as an invader but as a liberator. The Egyptians, weary of Persian rule, saw in Alexander a powerful ally who could restore their lands to greatness. As he entered Egypt, the warmth of the welcome surprised Alexander. From the common folk to the priests, everyone hailed him as a hero. They were ready to embrace him as their pharaoh, a role that Alexander, ever the strategist, was willing to accept if it meant securing his position in Egypt. One of Alexander's first actions in Egypt was to visit the oracle of Siwa. The journey through the desert was treacherous, a test of endurance for both man and horse. The desert stretched out in all directions, a sea of sand and scorching sun. Yet Alexander was determined. The oracle of Siwa was said to be a direct connection to the gods, and Alexander sought its counsel. Upon reaching the oasis of Siwa, Alexander consulted the oracle in private. What was said in that sacred space remains a mystery. But when Alexander emerged, his resolve was stronger than ever. He believed he had the gods' favor for his conquests. With the blessing he believed he had received, Alexander set his sights on a grand project. He would build a city that would bear his name, Alexandria. Located by the Mediterranean Sea, Alexandria was envisioned as a center of commerce, culture, and learning. Alexander laid out the plan for the city himself, envisioning wide streets, grand palaces, and a harbor that would welcome ships from all corners of the world. The founding of Alexandria was symbolic of Alexander's ambitions. It was to be a link between Greece and the rich lands of Egypt, a place where cultures could meet and blend. Alexander's vision for the city reflected his broader vision for his empire, where diverse peoples could live together under his rule. But Alexander's stay in Egypt was not just about building cities and seeking divine approval. It was also a time for him to strengthen his control over the region. He made offerings to the Egyptian gods, respecting local customs and traditions. In return, the Egyptians gave him their loyalty. They saw in him not just a conqueror, but a pharaoh who could lead them to prosperity. Alexander's time in Egypt laid the foundations for what would become one of the most important cities of the ancient world. Alexandria would go on to be a beacon of knowledge, home to the famous Library of Alexandria and the Lighthouse, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. As Alexander left Egypt, his legend grew. He had come as a conqueror, but left as a ruler who respected the people and their traditions. His journey through Egypt was a reminder that his quest was not just for territory, but for the unity and prosperity of his empire. In this chapter of our story, we have seen Alexander in a new light. In Egypt, he was not just a military leader, but a visionary who sought to bring together different cultures under his rule. His visit to the Oracle of Siwa and the founding of Alexandria were steps toward realizing his dream of a vast, diverse empire. As we close this chapter, Alexander's journey continues. Ahead of him lie more battles, more cities to conquer, and more dreams to fulfill. But his time in Egypt will be remembered as a moment when the conqueror paused to build, to dream, and to seek wisdom from the gods. Egypt welcomed him as a liberator, and in return, he gave them a city that would outlast empires, Alexandria, the jewel of the Mediterranean. Chapter 7. The Battle of Gaugamela. After leaving Egypt, Alexander's next great challenge was the Battle of Gaugamela, a confrontation that would decide the fate of the Persian Empire. This battle was not just another conflict. It was a clash between two of the greatest armies of the ancient world, led by two formidable leaders, Alexander and King Darius III of Persia. The battlefield was chosen by Darius near the village of Gaugamela. It was a vast open plain which Darius believed would favor his larger army and his chariots equipped with scythe blades. Darius wanted a decisive battle, and he did everything he could to tilt the odds in his favor, even having the ground leveled to accommodate his chariots. Alexander, aware of Darius's preparations, devised a cunning plan. He knew that facing the Persians head-on in a battle of attrition would be playing into Darius's hands. So, he decided to use his smaller, more agile force to his advantage, focusing on flexibility and the element of surprise. On the eve of the battle, Alexander's army camped a short distance from the plain of Gaugamela. The Macedonian king knew that the upcoming battle would be a turning point in his campaign. He spent the night before the battle walking among his troops, speaking with them, and ensuring their morale was high. As dawn broke, both armies prepared for battle. Darius's forces vastly outnumbered Alexander's, but the Macedonians were seasoned veterans, skilled in the art of war. Alexander positioned his phalanx, the backbone of his army, in the center with cavalry on the wings. He held his companion cavalry, his most trusted unit, in reserve, ready to exploit any weakness in the Persian lines. The battle began with Darius launching his chariots, hoping to break Alexander's lines early on. However, Alexander had anticipated this move. He ordered his troops to create gaps in their formations, allowing the chariots to pass through harmlessly before they were neutralized by his soldiers. As the battle raged, Alexander spotted an opening in the Persian lines. Seizing the moment, he led a bold charge with his companion cavalry, aiming directly for Darius. The Persian king, seeing Alexander charging towards him, was filled with panic. This decisive moment turned the tide of the battle. Darius, fearing for his life, fled the battlefield, leaving his army leaderless. With Darius's departure, the morale of the Persian army crumbled. Alexander's forces pressed their advantage, and soon the mighty Persian army was in retreat. The Battle of Gaugamela was a stunning victory for Alexander. It showcased not only his brilliance as a military tactician, but also the discipline and courage of his army. The aftermath of Gaugamela was significant. Darius's flight left the Persian Empire vulnerable, and Alexander was quick to capitalize on this. He marched his army into Babylon, then Susa, and finally Persepolis, the heart of the Persian Empire. These cities opened their gates to Alexander, who was now seen as the legitimate successor to Darius. The victory at Gaugamela was Alexander's greatest military achievement. It was not just the skill of his army that won the day, but his ability to adapt to the battlefield's realities. He had faced an enemy that outnumbered him significantly and had turned what seemed like insurmountable odds into a decisive victory. This chapter of Alexander's story is a testament to his prowess as a military leader and his vision as a commander. The Battle of Gaugamela was more than just a clash of armies. It was a battle that reshaped the ancient world, bringing the vast territories of the Persian Empire under Alexander's control. As we conclude this chapter, we reflect on the lessons of Gaugamela. It teaches us about the importance of leadership, strategy, and the will to seize the moment when destiny calls. Alexander's victory at Gaugamela was a turning point in his conquest of the Persian Empire, a feat that would immortalize him as one of history's greatest conquerors. Chapter 8: The King of Asia. Following the monumental victory at the Battle of Gaugamela, Alexander's journey took a new direction. He had not only defeated the mighty Persian army, but had also dethroned King Darius III, paving his way to claim the title of King of Asia. This chapter marks a significant turn in Alexander's quest, highlighting the shift from conquering lands to unifying and governing an empire. As Alexander marched through the vast territories of the Persian Empire, his approach to leadership began to evolve. He understood that to successfully rule his new domain, he would need to blend Macedonian and Persian cultures. This decision was not just practical. It was a strategic move to win the hearts and minds of his new subjects. Alexander's first step towards this cultural fusion was adopting Persian dress for himself and his close companions. This gesture, though simple, was profound. It symbolized respect for Persian traditions and a willingness to embrace the culture of the conquered lands. However, this decision was met with mixed feelings among his Macedonian soldiers. Some saw it as a betrayal of their own culture, while others understood the necessity of such changes for the sake of unity and stability. To further strengthen the bond between Macedonians and Persians, Alexander introduced the policy of marriages between his Macedonian officers and Persian noblewomen. This act was not only about forming personal connections, but also about creating alliances that would ensure loyalty and peace within his empire. These marriages were celebrated with grand festivities, showcasing the merging of two cultures and the beginning of a new era. Alexander also took significant steps in administration to integrate Persian customs and governance structures. He appointed Persians to high-ranking positions within the government, ensuring that the administration of the empire would be a blend of Macedonian efficiency and Persian tradition. This inclusivity extended to his army as well, with Persian soldiers being integrated into Macedonian ranks, creating a more diverse and robust military force. One of Alexander's most notable acts was his visit to the Persian ceremonial capital, Persepolis. The city was a symbol of Persian wealth and power, and Alexander's entry into the city was both a victory lap and a statement of his new role as the ruler of Asia. However, the subsequent burning of Persepolis, whether by accident or deliberate action, marked the end of the Persian Empire's glory and the irreversible transition of power to Alexander. Despite these efforts to unify his empire, Alexander faced challenges and resistance. Not all Persians were ready to accept a foreign ruler, and there were revolts and uprisings in various parts of the empire. Alexander dealt with these challenges decisively, demonstrating both clemency and ruthlessness when needed. His actions, though sometimes controversial, underscored his primary goal: to maintain stability and unity within his vast empire. Alexander's journey through the Persian Empire was not just a military campaign, but a mission to forge a new world order. By adopting Persian customs and integrating different cultures, he sought to create an empire that was diverse yet unified under his rule. This vision of a blended empire was ahead of its time, and showcased Alexander's understanding of the complexities of governance and the importance of cultural inclusivity. As we close this chapter, Alexander's legacy as the King of Asia is not only marked by his military conquests, but also by his ambitious attempts to unify a vast and diverse empire. His strategies of cultural integration and governance laid the foundations for what could have been a lasting legacy of unity and prosperity. Alexander's dream of a united empire, where Macedonian and Persian cultures coexisted and thrived, remains one of the most intriguing aspects of his remarkable journey. The story of Alexander the Great is a testament to the power of ambition, the complexities of leadership, and the challenges of uniting diverse cultures under a single vision. As we reflect on this chapter of his life, we see a ruler who was not only a conqueror, but also a visionary, striving to create a new world from the mosaic of peoples and cultures he had brought together. Chapter 9: The Afghan Campaign. After securing the title of King of Asia and implementing strategies to unify his vast empire, Alexander the Great turned his attention to Afghanistan. This new chapter in his conquests proved to be one of the most challenging. Afghanistan's rugged terrain and the fierce independence of its people presented obstacles that even Alexander found daunting. The campaign in Afghanistan began with Alexander's march into the region, known for its harsh landscapes of towering mountains and deep valleys. Unlike the flat battlefields of Persia, Afghanistan's terrain was a formidable enemy in its own right. Alexander quickly realized that the conventional tactics used in previous campaigns would not suffice here. One of the first challenges Alexander faced was the guerrilla warfare tactics employed by the Afghan tribes. These warriors knew their land intimately and used it to their advantage, launching surprise attacks from the mountains and then disappearing before Alexander's forces could retaliate. The speed and mobility of these attacks frustrated Alexander and his army, accustomed to facing their enemies in open combat. To counter these tactics, Alexander adapted his approach. He divided his army into smaller, more mobile units, capable of rapid movements. These units were tasked with pursuing the Afghan warriors into the mountains, a dangerous and exhausting endeavor. Despite these efforts, the elusive nature of their enemy and the difficult terrain made progress slow and costly. The climate of Afghanistan also posed a significant challenge to Alexander and his men. The extreme conditions, from scorching days to freezing nights, tested the endurance of the Macedonian army. Supplies became scarce, and the harsh environment took its toll on the soldiers' health and morale. Despite these hardships, Alexander persisted. He understood the strategic importance of Afghanistan as a gateway to India and was determined to secure the region. He embarked on a series of campaigns to subdue the local tribes, employing both military might and diplomacy. Alexander sought to win over the people by respecting their customs and offering them protection under his rule. However, the loyalty of the Afghan tribes was hard-earned and often tenuous, as their allegiance could shift with the changing winds. One of the most significant moments of the Afghan campaign was the siege of the Sogdian Rock, a fortress thought to be impregnable. Situated on a high cliff, it was defended by a small but determined force. Alexander, never one to be deterred by the seemingly impossible, ordered a group of his best climbers to scale the cliffs under the cover of darkness. This audacious plan succeeded, and the fortress fell to Alexander, showcasing his willingness to take bold risks to achieve his objectives. The Afghan campaign was a turning point for Alexander and his army. It was here that they faced some of their most significant challenges, not just from their enemies, but from the environment itself. The campaign stretched the limits of their endurance, both physically and mentally. Yet, it also demonstrated Alexander's ability to adapt his strategies and tactics to meet the demands of unfamiliar and unforgiving landscapes. As Alexander's forces finally established control over the region, the campaign in Afghanistan left its mark on them. It was a testament to their perseverance in the face of adversity and their capacity to overcome the seemingly insurmountable. For Alexander, it was a reminder of the costs of empire building and the unpredictable nature of warfare. In this chapter of our story, we've seen a different aspect of Alexander's conquests. Away from the grand battles and political maneuverings, we've witnessed the grit and determination required to campaign in one of the most challenging terrains in the world. The Afghan campaign was not just a military endeavor. It was a struggle against nature itself, against the very elements and landscapes that shaped the lives of the people Alexander sought to bring under his rule. As we leave behind the rugged mountains and valleys of Afghanistan, we move forward in Alexander's journey, carrying with us the lessons learned from this grueling campaign. It was here that Alexander's resolve was tested and his ambitions met the hard realities of warfare and conquest. The Afghan campaign is a reminder of the human costs of Alexander's quest for empire and the enduring spirit of the people who call these ancient lands home. Chapter 10. The Indian Adventure. Following his grueling campaign in Afghanistan, Alexander set his sights further east, towards the lush and mysterious lands of India. This new chapter in his conquests promised not just another military challenge, but also the opportunity to encounter cultures and peoples unlike any he had seen before. As Alexander and his army crossed into India, they were met with a landscape that was both beautiful and daunting. The dense forests, mighty rivers, and diverse wildlife of India presented a stark contrast to the deserts and mountains they had traversed before. Yet, it was not just the natural environment that was new. The societies and kingdoms of India were well organized and ready to defend their lands. One of the most significant challenges Alexander faced in India was the Battle of the Hydaspes River, where he encountered the army of King Porus, a ruler of great size and strength, commanding an army that included war elephants. These towering beasts were unlike anything Alexander's soldiers had faced before, and their presence on the battlefield was both a physical and psychological challenge. The battle took place on the banks of the Hydaspes River, under the cover of a violent storm. Alexander, known for his tactical brilliance, devised a plan to cross the river without alerting King Porus. He led a part of his army across the river, at a point far from the main camp, under the cover of night and the sound of the storm masking their movements. When dawn broke, Porus was taken by surprise to find Alexander's forces ready to engage in battle on his side of the river. Despite the initial surprise, the battle was fierce and intense. King Porus and his men fought bravely, with the war elephants causing chaos in the Macedonian ranks. However, Alexander's cavalry and phalanxes, seasoned from years of campaign, managed to hold their ground and eventually turned the tide of the battle in their favor. The Battle of the Hydaspes River was a hard-fought victory for Alexander. It showcased his willingness to adapt his tactics and face new challenges head-on. The respect Alexander felt for Porus's bravery and leadership was such that, after the battle, he granted Porus his kingdom back and the two became allies. This act of magnanimity towards a defeated enemy was a testament to Alexander's character and his vision of ruling not through fear, but through respect and alliance. Alexander's time in India was not solely defined by battles. He was fascinated by the culture and the people he encountered. The philosophers, or gymnosophists, who engaged in discussions with him left a lasting impression on Alexander, challenging his perspectives and broadening his understanding of the world. However, Alexander's journey into India also marked the limits of his campaign. His army, weary from years of continuous battle and long marches, eventually reached a point where they could go no further. The soldiers, who had followed Alexander through thick and thin, finally expressed their desire to return home, to see their families and lands they had left behind years ago. Faced with the discontent of his army and realizing the practical difficulties of extending his empire further into India, Alexander made the difficult decision to turn back. This decision marked the end of his eastern conquests and the beginning of the long journey back to Babylon. The Indian adventure was a defining chapter in Alexander's campaign, filled with battles against formidable foes, encounters with new cultures, and the realization of the limits of his ambitions. It was here that Alexander's dream of a world empire faced the hard realities of nature, distance, and the human spirit. As we close this chapter, we reflect on the complexities of Alexander's character, a conqueror who sought not just to defeat his enemies but to understand and embrace the cultures he encountered. His campaign in India was a testament to his brilliance as a military leader and his capacity for respect and admiration towards those he fought against. Alexander's journey through India remains one of the most captivating tales of his conquests, a story of adventure, battle, and the pursuit of a dream that stretched the boundaries of the known world. It reminds us of the enduring human desire to explore, to understand, and ultimately to find our place in the vast tapestry of history. Chapter 11. The World's End. The journey of Alexander and his army into the heart of India was marked by battles, alliances, and the discovery of new lands. However, as they reached the Beas River, the mood among the soldiers began to change. They had marched thousands of miles from home, fought countless battles, and now stood at the edge of the known world. The Beas River, flowing quietly in the distance, seemed to them like the end of the world. Alexander was eager to push further, to explore lands beyond the Beas River. His dream of a world empire had not faded. It burned brighter with every new territory he encountered. However, his men, who had followed him loyally through the deserts of Egypt, the mountains of Afghanistan, and the forests of India, were exhausted. They longed for their families and homes. The thought of marching into unknown lands filled them with dread, not excitement. Faced with the refusal of his army to go further, Alexander found himself at a crossroads. It was a moment of profound realization for him. No matter how grand his ambitions, they could not be achieved without the support of his men. Reluctantly, and with a heavy heart, Alexander agreed to turn back. It was a decision that marked the end of his eastward conquests. The journey back to Babylon was not an easy one. Alexander chose to return through the Gedrosian desert, a route known for its harsh and unforgiving conditions. This decision puzzled many, but Alexander saw it as a test of endurance, a way to maintain the discipline and resolve of his army. The march through the Gedrosian desert was grueling. The scorching sun, the lack of water, and the vast, empty landscape tested the limits of human endurance. Every step was a struggle for survival. The desert claimed the lives of many soldiers and camp followers, a stark reminder of the costs of ambition. Yet, even in the face of such hardships, there were moments of discovery and wonder. Alexander's keen interest in the world around him never waned. He took note of the strange plants, animals, and weather patterns of the desert, adding to the wealth of knowledge he had gathered on his campaigns. The hardships of the desert also brought out the best in Alexander's leadership. He shared the hardships of his men, marching with them, sharing their meager rations, and offering words of encouragement. His actions during this time reinforced the loyalty of his men, even in the face of adversity. Finally, after months of arduous travel, Alexander and his army emerged from the Gedrosian desert. They had survived one of the most challenging journeys of their lives, a testament to their resilience and the strength of their bond with their leader. The return to Babylon was a time of reflection for Alexander. The journey through the Gedrosian desert had been a humbling experience. He had reached the limits of his empire, not just geographically but also in terms of the loyalty and endurance of his men. The world, it seemed, was not limitless after all. As we close this chapter, we are left to ponder the legacy of Alexander's journey. It was a journey that brought him to the edge of the known world and then through the heart of the desert. Along the way, he encountered new peoples, cultures, and landscapes, leaving a mark on history that would endure for centuries to come. Alexander's conquests may have ended at the Bees River, but the story of his incredible journey continues to inspire and captivate us to this day. Chapter 12. The City of Susa. After the arduous journey through the Gedrosian desert, Alexander's next significant move was in the city of Susa, an ancient city that held great importance in the Persian Empire. Here, Alexander planned something unprecedented, a mass wedding ceremony that would symbolically unite the Macedonian and Persian cultures, solidifying the bonds between his Macedonian soldiers and the Persian nobility. The city of Susa was buzzing with anticipation. Alexander had invited his generals, soldiers, and Persian nobles to partake in a grand event. This was not just a political act, but also a deeply personal gesture from Alexander, showing his commitment to the unity of his diverse empire. The mass wedding was a spectacle of unity and celebration. In total, 80 of Alexander's most trusted Macedonian officers were married to Persian noblewomen. The ceremony was a blend of Macedonian and Persian traditions, showcasing the fusion of cultures that Alexander sought to achieve. He himself took a Persian bride, the daughter of the defeated King Darius III, further solidifying the message of unity. The significance of these marriages extended beyond the personal bonds they created. They were a powerful statement of Alexander's vision for his empire, where Macedonians and Persians could live together in peace and mutual respect. By marrying Persian women, Alexander's officers were not just taking wives, they were forming alliances, linking their destinies with the people they had once conquered. Alexander's actions in Susa spoke volumes about his approach to ruling his vast empire. He understood that military conquest alone could not ensure lasting peace or loyalty. The unity of his empire depended on the integration and acceptance of different cultures and peoples. The mass wedding was his way of weaving these diverse threads into a single tapestry. The celebrations in Susa lasted for days, filled with feasts, music, and dances that combined elements of both Macedonian and Persian culture. These festivities were not just for the elite. Alexander made sure that the celebrations were shared with the common soldiers and citizens of Susa, further promoting the sense of unity and shared joy. However, The decision to blend the cultures through marriage was met with mixed reactions. While many saw the wisdom in Alexander's actions, others, especially some Macedonian soldiers who longed for their homeland, viewed these marriages with suspicion and resentment. They feared that their king was becoming too Persian, losing the Macedonian virtues that had led to their victories. Alexander addressed these concerns directly. He spoke to his men, reminding them of the shared struggles and victories that had brought them this far. He emphasized that the future of their empire lay in unity, not division. He promised that these marriages would bring strength and stability to their lands, creating bonds that would endure beyond their lifetimes. As the years passed, the impact of the mass weddings in Susa became evident. The children born from these unions grew up in a world where Macedonian and Persian cultures coexisted. They were the living symbols of Alexander's vision, a new generation that could bridge the gap between East and West. The city of Susa, once a symbol of Persian power, had become a beacon of Alexander's new empire, where different cultures and peoples could come together in peace. The mass wedding was a bold experiment in cultural integration, one that spoke of Alexander's deep understanding of the complexities of ruling a diverse empire. As we reflect on this chapter, we see a leader who was ahead of his time, willing to challenge the norms and prejudices of his day to create a more integrated and peaceful world. The legacy of the mass wedding in Susa endures as a symbol of Alexander's commitment to unity, diversity, and the forging of a new path for his empire. Chapter 13. The Babylon Projects. Upon his return from the Indian campaign, Alexander turned his attention to Babylon, the ancient city that he envisioned as the heart of his vast empire. Babylon, with its legendary gardens and imposing walls, was already a wonder of the world. But Alexander had plans to transform it into the center of a global empire that would unite the East and West. Alexander's vision for Babylon was grand. He imagined the city not just as a political capital, but as a cultural and economic hub that would attract scholars, artists, and traders from all corners of the known world. His projects for Babylon were as ambitious as his military campaigns, reflecting his desire to leave a lasting legacy. One of Alexander's first initiatives was to restore and expand the city's infrastructure. He ordered the repair of the city's towering walls and the renovation of its temples, paying special homage to the god Marduk, whom the Babylonians venerated. Alexander understood the importance of respecting local traditions and beliefs, and he sought to integrate himself into the fabric of Babylonian society. But Alexander's plans went beyond restoration. He envisioned new constructions that would surpass the wonders of the world. Among these was a grand palace that would serve as his residence, a symbol of his authority and the unity of his empire. He also planned to create a vast harbor that could accommodate the ships from his new naval expeditions, aiming to explore and map the Arabian Peninsula and beyond. The Arabian Peninsula, with its vast deserts and unknown territories, represented the next frontier for Alexander's ambitions. He envisioned establishing trade routes that would connect the far reaches of his empire, from the Indus Valley to the Mediterranean. These routes would not only bring wealth, but also facilitate the exchange of ideas and cultures, further unifying his empire. Alexander's plans for exploration included scientific and cultural objectives as well. He wanted to send expeditions to study the flora, fauna, and peoples of the Arabian Peninsula, continuing his lifelong quest for knowledge. These expeditions would be led by scholars and scientists who would document their findings, adding to the library of knowledge that Alexander sought to build in Babylon. However, Alexander's ambitious projects required time, resources, and peace, commodities that were increasingly scarce. The vast empire he had built was difficult to manage, with unrest in some provinces and the constant need for military presence to maintain order. Moreover, Alexander's health began to decline, casting a shadow over his grand plans. Despite these challenges, Alexander pressed on with his projects, driven by the same determination that had led him to conquer the known world. He held meetings with architects, engineers, and scholars, discussing his plans and seeking their advice. Babylon began to buzz with activity as workers and artisans from across the empire gathered to contribute to its transformation. But fate had other plans. Before many of Alexander's projects could be realized, he fell gravely ill. The city of Babylon, which was to be the crown jewel of his empire, became the place where Alexander the Great's journey came to an end. He died in Babylon, leaving behind an empire that was as vast as it was diverse, and a legacy that would endure through the ages. The Babylon projects remained largely uncompleted, but the vision Alexander had for the city and his empire continued to inspire generations. His plans for Babylon reflected his broader aspirations for a world united under a single ruler, where different cultures and peoples could coexist and thrive. As we reflect on Alexander's ambitions for Babylon, we see a man who, even at the height of his power, was looking to the future, dreaming of new worlds to explore and new achievements to attain. The Babylon projects stand as a testament to Alexander's undying spirit of adventure and his unwavering commitment to the idea of a world empire that would bridge the divide between East and West. Chapter 14. The Death of a King. In the ancient city of Babylon, where rivers whispered ancient secrets and palm trees swayed under the sun, the world stood still. Alexander the Great, the king who had marched across the known world, lay stricken by a mysterious illness. His soldiers, who had followed him through countless battles, now waited anxiously outside his chambers, hoping for any sign of recovery. But fate had its course, and soon the man who dreamt of uniting the world under one empire breathed his last. Alexander's sudden illness caught everyone by surprise. Just days before, he was planning expeditions to Arabia and considering projects to further enhance Babylon. Then, without warning, he fell ill. The best physicians were summoned, but none could diagnose the cause of his ailment accurately. Some whispered it was a fever, others feared it was poison. The truth, however, remained elusive, shrouded in the mists of history. As Alexander's condition worsened, his generals and closest companions kept a constant vigil by his side. They were warriors, accustomed to facing death on the battlefield, but the sight of their invincible leader succumbing to an invisible enemy was a blow none were prepared for. In his final moments, Alexander was asked to whom he left his empire. His reply, "To the strongest," was as enigmatic as his sudden illness. It was a statement that would haunt his empire for generations, as his generals, the Diadochi, would fight among themselves to claim Alexander's legacy. The news of Alexander's death spread like wildfire across the empire, from the marble streets of Athens to the sands of Egypt. A wave of grief washed over the lands he had conquered, for despite his role as a conqueror, Alexander had also been a unifier, a visionary who sought to blend cultures and knowledge from the various corners of his realm. In the aftermath of his death, Alexander's body was embalmed with the honors befitting a hero of his stature. Plans were made to transport his remains to Macedonia, but Ptolemy, one of his trusted generals, intercepted the procession bringing Alexander's body to Egypt instead. There, in the city of Alexandria, Alexander was laid to rest in a mausoleum that would become a site of pilgrimage for those who wished to pay homage to the great king. The question of Alexander's sudden death remains one of history's great mysteries. Was it a disease contracted during his campaigns, the result of his many wounds, or perhaps the consequence of his own relentless drive? We may never know. What is certain, however, is the impact of his death on the world he sought to unite. Alexander's legacy is a complex tapestry woven from his conquests, his dreams, and the cultural exchanges he facilitated. He founded cities that would become centers of learning and trade, spread Greek culture across the known world, and opened channels of communication between diverse civilizations. Yet, his empire, fragmented after his death, also serves as a testament to the impermanence of power and the fleeting nature of conquest. As we contemplate the life and death of Alexander the Great, we are reminded of the profound impact one individual can have on the course of history. His story, marked by triumph and tragedy, continues to captivate and inspire, a testament to the enduring allure of the dream of a united world. Alexander's legacy, like the empire he built, spans the vast tapestry of human history, reminding us of the power of ambition, the quest for knowledge, and the unyielding desire to leave a mark on the world. Chapter 15. The Empire Crumbles. With the passing of Alexander the Great, the vast empire he had built stood at a crossroads. The king had left behind no clear successor, and his empire, stretching from the rugged mountains of Macedonia to the sands of Egypt and the rivers of India, was now a leaderless expanse. His final words, "To the strongest," ignited a struggle for power among his generals, known as the Diadochi. This struggle would eventually lead to the fragmentation of the empire and the rise of the Hellenistic world. The days following Alexander's death saw the beginning of the end for the unified empire he had envisioned. His generals, once united under Alexander's leadership, now saw an opportunity to carve out kingdoms for themselves. The empire was divided into several realms, each ruled by one of Alexander's former generals. Ptolemy took control of Egypt, Seleucus claimed the vast stretches of the Near East, and Antigonus became ruler of a large portion of Asia Minor. Meanwhile, Cassander established his dominion in Macedonia and Greece. This division was not a peaceful process. It led to years of conflict, as the Diadochi fought among themselves and against others who sought to claim a piece of Alexander's empire. These wars reshaped the map of the ancient world, with each general striving not just for territory, but for the legacy of Alexander himself. Despite the empire's fragmentation, Alexander's influence remained undeniable. The period that followed his death is known as the Hellenistic Age, a time when Greek culture spread throughout the Near East and beyond, blending with local traditions and creating a vibrant new world of cultural and intellectual exchange. In the cities founded by Alexander and his successors, Greek became the language of administration and culture. This facilitated the spread of Greek philosophy, science, and art, influencing societies far beyond the original boundaries of Greece. The Library of Alexandria in Egypt became a symbol of this cultural synthesis, attracting scholars from all over the known world. One of the most significant impacts of Alexander's rule and its aftermath was on the city of Alexandria. Founded by Alexander himself, it grew under Ptolemy's rule into a center of learning and commerce, home to the famous library and the lighthouse, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Alexandria represented the essence of the Hellenistic world, a place where Greek and Eastern cultures merged to create something entirely new. Yet, the dream of a united empire under one ruler, as Alexander had envisioned, was lost. The wars of the Diadochi set the stage for new powers to emerge, including the Roman Empire, which would eventually absorb much of the Hellenistic world into its own vast territories. The legacy of Alexander's empire is a complex one. On one hand, it was an era of conflict and fragmentation, with his successors' ambitions leading to endless wars. On the other hand, it was a period of incredible cultural and intellectual achievement, where the fusion of Greek and Eastern traditions gave rise to advancements in science, philosophy, and the arts that would shape the future of the Western world. Chapter 15. The Empire Crumbles reflects on the aftermath of Alexander's death and the dissolution of his empire. It underscores the transient nature of political power and the enduring impact of cultural and intellectual exchange. The Hellenistic age, born from the division of Alexander's empire, stands as a testament to his legacy, not just as a conqueror, but as a catalyst for the blending of cultures that would continue to influence humanity long after the wars of the Diadochi had faded into history. As we close this chapter, we are reminded of the paradox at the heart of Alexander's story. His quest for empire led to both division and unification, conflict and cultural flourishing. The world he left behind was one marked by the contradictions of his ambitions, an empire that crumbled, yet a legacy that endured, shaping the course of history in ways that the young king of Macedonia could never have imagined. Chapter 16. The Legend Lives On. As the dust settled on the battlefields and the once vast empire of Alexander the Great was divided among his generals, the legacy of the man known as the Great began to take on a life of its own. Alexander's ambitions had reshaped the map of the ancient world, but it was his enduring influence on culture, science, and philosophy that truly immortalized him in the annals of history. Despite the fragmentation of his empire, Alexander's dream of a world where Greek culture mingled with the customs and knowledge of the East did not die. This fusion, known as Hellenism, flourished in the territories he had conquered. Greek became the lingua franca, a common language that allowed for an unprecedented exchange of ideas across vast distances. In the great cities that Alexander founded, and in those that thrived under his successors, the Hellenistic age bloomed. Alexandria in Egypt stood as the most illustrious example. Its library attracted scholars from all corners of the known world, becoming a center for learning and research that preserved and expanded upon the knowledge of the ancient world. Art and architecture also witnessed a renaissance during the Hellenistic period. The styles and techniques developed in Greece were adapted and evolved as they spread through Alexander's former empire. The iconic image of Alexander himself, with his distinctive swept-back hair, became a symbol of leadership and heroism that was replicated in sculptures and coins across the Hellenistic world. Moreover, Alexander's campaigns had a lasting impact on military strategy and tactics. His use of the phalanx, combined with cavalry maneuvers, set new standards for warfare that would influence generals and military thinkers for centuries to come. Yet, the legacy of Alexander the Great is not without its complexities. While he is celebrated as a visionary leader and a military genius, he is also remembered for the destruction and loss of life that accompanied his quest for empire. The cities he founded and the cultural exchanges he facilitated came at a great cost, and the legend of Alexander lives on within this paradox. In the centuries that followed, Alexander's life and exploits became the stuff of legend, inspiring countless stories, plays, and works of art. He was studied by the Romans, who admired his achievements and sought to emulate his successes. In the Middle Ages, Alexander was celebrated as a model of chivalry and virtue, his story told and retold in numerous languages across Europe and the Middle East. Today, Alexander the Great continues to captivate the imagination of people around the world. His life is studied by historians and archaeologists who seek to uncover the truth behind the legend. He is a subject of fascination in popular culture, depicted in films, novels, and television series that attempt to capture the essence of his character and the epic scope of his adventures. Chapter 16. The Legend Lives On is a reflection on the enduring legacy of Alexander the Great. It is a testament to the power of ambition and the quest for knowledge, as well as the complexities of history and the impact of one individual's dreams on the world. Alexander's conquests spread Greek culture across the known world, influencing countless generations and leaving a mark on civilization that lasts to this day. As we explore the legacy of Alexander, we are reminded of the dual nature of his achievements. He was both a creator and a destroyer, a unifier and a conqueror. His vision of a world united under Hellenism brought about cultural exchanges that enriched humanity. Yet it also led to conflicts that reshaped the ancient world. The story of Alexander the Great is a reminder of the profound influence one person can have on the course of history. His legend lives on, not just in the territories he conquered or the cities he founded, but in the idea that it is possible to dream of a world beyond the known, to reach for the impossible, and in doing so, leave a legacy that endures through the ages. Chapter 17. Reflections. As we reach the end of our journey through the life and times of Alexander the Great, it's a moment to pause and reflect on the man whose ambitions reshaped the ancient world. Alexander's story is one of unparalleled achievements, marked by both brilliance and controversy. His legacy, like the empire he built, is vast and complex, inspiring admiration and debate through the ages. Alexander's success as a leader can be attributed to several key qualities. His courage and determination were evident from a young age, driving him to pursue the dream of conquering the Persian Empire. His military genius allowed him to win battles against seemingly insurmountable odds, using innovative tactics and strategies that are still studied today. Alexander's vision of a united empire, where Greek and Eastern cultures merged, showcased his forward-thinking approach to leadership and governance. However, Alexander's quest for glory was not without its darker aspects. His campaigns, while successful, brought about the destruction of cities and the loss of countless lives. The manner in which he dealt with dissent and rebellion within his ranks and among conquered peoples has been a point of contention among historians. Alexander's personality, characterized by moments of great generosity and ruthless ambition, has led to varied interpretations of his actions and intentions. The controversies surrounding Alexander's legacy are as vast as the empire he once ruled. Some view him as a hero, a visionary leader who sought to bring about a new era of cultural exchange and understanding. Others see him as a conqueror, whose ambitions led to suffering and upheaval across the known world. The truth perhaps lies somewhere in between, in the grey areas that history often inhabits. Reflecting on Alexander's achievements, it's important to consider the context of his time. He was a product of his environment, driven by the values and aspirations of the Macedonian kingdom from which he hailed. His education under Aristotle, one of the greatest philosophers of the age, equipped him with a curiosity and respect for knowledge that would influence his approach to empire building. Alexander's vision of a united empire where diverse cultures could coexist and thrive was ahead of its time. While his dream of a lasting unity was not fully realized in his lifetime, the Hellenistic age that followed his death was a testament to the lasting impact of his conquests. The spread of Greek culture and ideas, along with the exchange of knowledge and traditions from the East, created a rich tapestry of cultural and intellectual achievement. As we reflect on the life of Alexander the Great, we are reminded of the complexities of history and the multifaceted nature of leadership. Alexander's story is a reminder of the power of ambition, the costs of conquest, and the enduring quest for understanding and unity among diverse peoples. Chapter 17, Reflections, invites us to ponder the legacy of Alexander, not just as a historical figure, but as a symbol of the human desire to reach beyond the known, to achieve greatness, and to leave a mark on the world. His life challenges us to consider the balance between ambition and humility, power and responsibility, and the impact of our actions on the world and future generations. In the end, Alexander the Great remains a figure of fascination and inspiration, a reminder of the heights to which humanity can aspire and the depths it can reach in the pursuit of glory. His story, filled with achievements and controversies, invites us to reflect on our own place in the tapestry of history and the legacy we wish to leave behind.